Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to have the happy task of discussing the defense against the Bengals in that big win Sunday for the Ravens. Joining me to do that is Denard Milton. You know him from the Fire Zone show. Denard, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Thanks for having me on today.
I appreciate you always. You guys have had me on before, of course, and I'm glad to have you again on the show. Just a fantastic day for Baltimore sports yesterday, with that incredible Orioles win, twice down to their last out, and the Ravens doing very early Lamar Ravens-like things in terms of this offense to be very efficient and put away a game.
Feels good to be in the city right now, and in particular in the state, because even Maryland won too.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I normally try and pay a little attention to Maryland. I saw they beat Virginia, but what happened in that game anyway? How one-sided was it?
I didn't really watch it. I was watching JMU against Troy. So I was engrossed in my alma mater, and we went down there and handled business when people thought we couldn't do it. So
you're a JMU guy?
I went to school down there, yeah.
Okay. And Troy is in Georgia, right? It's in Athens, Georgia? Or is it somewhere in Georgia?
I thought it was in Alabama.
You might be right. I really don't know.
Yeah. I think there's a Troy in Georgia, but I think the college is in Alabama. Okay. I may be wrong on that.
All right. And I know there's a Troy, New York, but I don't think they have much of a college program, and they may not have a college there either. But
probably not.
There you go. All right. Well, great to have you here. And I'm just so engrossed in Baltimore sports right that I have my own kind of self-imposed writing responsibilities. I know you guys have the same thing, because it's not like we get paid a ton of money at what we do here doing this, not through podcasting, definitely not through any of the writing I do. And, it's just, I want to allow myself to enjoy the Orioles as much as I'm enjoying the Ravens right now. It's hard to find 24 hours hard to find more than 24 hours in the day to do it.
Yeah. It feels good to be talking two good teams in a city where for a long time it was either or. And when it was both, it was stressful. It wasn't like good wins. It was just like we were sitting there literally on our seats like, is this going to fall apart? No, Delvin Young just hit a double down the line. It's like, it's crazy.
Great times there. That Delvin Young play. The Orioles fans deserve to have more than that one play to remember for the last 25 years or so. And unfortunately, that's about it.
Yeah.
That 2014 season fell apart. And, losing to Kansas City was a very, very bitter pill for me personally, not getting to go to another World Series after dominating the league. But anyway, it is what it is. Let's talk a little Ravens here. Let's get back to the Bengals. One of the things that I thought came out of this game was that the Ravens adapted very well to their opponent in this game.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's good to have a division game, particularly good to have a division game when you're a little banged up, because everybody is super focused, but everybody already kind of knows the team that you're playing. So there's not a lot of overwatching film and things on that sort. You got guys who are focused in, who are ready to play, who are understanding what the assignment is before you even get into, installing the game plan.
They've really played the same game against these Bengals the last 4 times they've met them. And what I mean by that, Ravens playing a lot of cover 2 on the back end. We'll get to a lot of this later. We're going to go into much more detail, but a lot of cover 2 on the back end, which kind of forced the Bengals, at least from their perspective, to throw the ball short. Mm-hmm. I want to back this up for a second first to 2021. And if you don't remember that year, it was not a pleasant year to play the Bengals. Burrow passed for, I think it was 941 yards against the Ravens in the 2 games that season, but it's over 900 anyway.
Yeah.
And 525
Yeah, it was my favorite D coordinator, Wink.
All right, having a problem with Wink already. Okay. But anyway, it wasn't Wink certainly liked pressure. I thought Wink was very adaptable too, but obviously he didn't adapt properly in that game. Mm-hmm. And this is where he kind of developed the quip about having DoorDash corners letting him down. Yeah. Well, we just saw yesterday it is possible to win a game against the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow with less than ideal cornerbacks.
Well, when you have a system in place and everybody understands that system and it's not changing week to week, formation to formation, play to play, then you can tailor made a game plan where you take the focus off the outside and make them throw inside, which seems like that was a big part of make them throw to our linebackers and our safeties. And if they're going to beat us, they're going to beat us there. And we're going to be okay with that. They're not going to beat us on the outside with Jamar Chase over the top, T. Higgins over the top, Boyd down, screaming down the seam. No, we're going to make you beat us by hitting your tight ends, hitting your in routes, and you're going to have to come to us.
Yeah. Specifically, what cover 2 takes away, of course, and you can play cover 2 a lot of different ways. We want to get into some of that later in the show, but when you play cover 2, you're really taking away all the way to the sideline with your safety. The weakness, in fact, is, they always say, is in the middle of the field against cover 2, but those safeties are very much on task to take the deep outside, as who was the announcer that was the ex-lineman who was so upset about Raheem Moore not being back for Jacoby Jones on the Mile High Miracle.
Oh, man. Yeah. I can still hear him screaming.
He's honestly, he's one of my favorite announcers of all time, but he did retire. It's Conrad Dobler was the lineman who played with him on the Cardinals, but he was like a left tackle, and how can I not remember this guy's name now? This is terrible.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm blanking.
It'll come to me. But anyway, that was the deep outside is something that the safeties are very easily able to take. But it was actually a play in the deep middle in this game, which really, I think, exposed Burrow in a way that really shows why they felt like they had to go outside for all game.
Are you talking about the Geno Stone pick?
Yep.
So that's a beautiful. We were talking about this pre-show. That's what the beautiful part of what we call a matchup zone in kind of that language of the world. But in essence, it's not like what you think in basketball, where it's a matchup zone. Like you go out and meet your guy and you come back and you move with the ball. In football, it's more about formations. So in that particular formation, there was 3 receivers to the right and a single to the left. And you already know as a defense, and you're probably most likely in some type of cover 2 rotational shell with possibility of having man coverage on the single side of that formation. So now you have a safety who is kind of checking to make sure the guy on the outside by himself is okay. And if you look at Stevens, he's got beautiful leverage from the get-go. So this frees up Stone to look for work. And on defense, that's like the mindset of every guy on defense is once you secure your zone, go find work.
So let's talk about this a little deeper, because I think the concept of matchup zone is a term that often gets bantied around and we hear about it. But I think there's a fair number of listeners here who don't know exactly what it is, but would love to have it explained anyway, even if they do. So matchup zone, as I learned it, was a set of rules for coverage that applies to different parts of the field differently.
Yes.
So the kind of the classic way I think of it is you line up against the Steelers bunch formation, usually with 3 guys opposite that, but there's a set of rules on who takes what coverage based on who's going where.
Absolutely. In college, we would call that, if there was a 3 receiver on there, it's a banjo. So 4 guys. So you have the linebacker, the safety, most likely the nickel, and the corner playing the 3 guys in that bunch. So most likely the linebacker will take the first inside cut. The safety will take the next outside, the first vertical. Corner will take the outside guy. Now the nickel is more or less either checking the running back or some type of zone underneath those 3 guys. Now
So he could
his
be the
rules,
clear out guy, for example. He could be checking on the clear out.
he can check on the clear out, he can check on the flare back, which Stone does a fantastic job on a couple plays. He almost missed that tackle late in the third or fourth on the sideline, but he got enough. But those are the type of plays, and we have the type of safeties with Hamilton, with Stone, and I'll give Stone credit because I was riding him in the preseason.
Yep.
He was not healthy, but he wasn't trusting his eyes. He trusted his eyes against the Bengals.
He is drafted. I mean, the reason that Geno Stone got drafted by the Baltimore Ravens is instincts on the back end. It's not speed, that's for sure. It's how he reads the quarterback. And I'm looking at that play, and we kind of maybe want to dissect it even a little further here. But he, in theory, he had the responsibility to take Chase once he broke inside leverage on Stevens.
Yeah,
Stevens watched this, was on him, no doubt about it. But Chase did take inside leverage, which was part of what the Ravens, I think, were trying to do. The problem was that Stone wasn't really looking at that at all. And in fact, after the game, he was interviewed and he said, "I saw he broke to the outside." Well, he didn't actually see he broke to the outside. He misread that. But he was looking directly at the quarterback, and you can see his eyes the whole time. Mm-hmm. That's Geno Stone at his best. And what I thought that exposed about Burrow is Burrow's arm strength, which I don't think is not good ever. I mean, doesn't ever really have elite arm strength, but it could be worse. I'm asking you this as a player too, because he's not being able to throw off his leg the way he would normally if his calf were right. So you watch that pass, it's got almost nothing on it. I mean, it's not a Joe Flacco throw, or a Lamar Jackson fastball. It's a high looping ball over the middle. It's a trajectory almost to get over a defender, rather than to get the ball as quickly as you can. And that gave Stone, not that Stone's instincts might not have been good enough to get there anyway, but it did give him a little bit of extra time to get there.
Yeah, Joe, Burrow's calf, yes, it could be part of it. But if you watch a lot of Burrow's tape, and we have him in our division, so we've seen him a lot play, he struggles with deep over the middle throws. Mm-hmm. It's something he struggles with mightily because he doesn't have elite arm strength. He's got good arm strength. He can throw the 12-yard out on a rope from the hash. He can do that. No problem. They protect him, though. Mm-hmm. He doesn't throw that long out that you see a lot. Like Lamar throws that long out that he threw to OBJ. You don't see a lot of that from Burrow. So he had Roquan Smith in his vision. So when he's throwing that, he's got to get it over that linebacker, but he doesn't have the drive to stick it in there like an Aaron Rodgers or a Josh Allen or a Pat Mahomes. I would even say even a Jimmy Garoppolo. Mm-hmm. He can make, because he's got better arm strength than Joe Burrow. His mind is in another land.
We could even say Joe Flacco if you wanted to, because he certainly had arm strength.
Yeah, I mean, him and Bolden made a living on that for 2-3 years. It's what they do. So all that plays into how Mike Macdonald called that game, and particularly in the red zone. He took away the outside, and he basically said, "You're going to beat me, Joe? You're going to beat me with your weakness. I'm going to give you the middle of the field." And Geno Smith understood the assignment. He saw and recognized third receiver was coming over the top of Roquan. I mean, that's picture-perfect safety play.
Mm-hmm. He shut the window. Oftentimes, also, when that ball is about to be thrown, the quarterback's focus is on out-throwing any trail coverage. So Hamilton was the last guy in trail coverage. So Roquan handed off the coverage to Hamilton. Hamilton was then in trail, trying to get there. And his vision is telling him, I need to line up that pass exactly. He's almost like lining up the dart on the dartboard kind of thing to try and find his spot. As soon as the quarterback starts to do that, he's lost focus completely on how the window is closing. And you'll often hear that from quarterbacks like Joe Flacco, who are trying to throw a quarterback. I didn't see the other guy. And I'm sure Burrow would say he didn't see Stone in this case, didn't really figure for him getting there. But he had just enough mustard on that ball to get it past the trail coverage of Hamilton, but not nearly enough to get it past the closing window there.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you as a defense, you're going to give up plays, but you can, when it's money time inside that 25, 30-yard line, however you're going to define the red zone now, the Ravens time and time again make it difficult for you to score. You don't go in there and get cheap scores. You're going to have to work for it.
Anytime you can compress the field as they did, and I thought that was really good because they allowed their cornerbacks, definitely the weakness of the team at this point, the weakness of the defense by far, no matter how much over their heads they're kind of playing. They had some good plays in this game.
Yeah.
But they did a wonderful job of keeping the play in front of them. And I thought they got very good support from the linebackers, Patrick Queen and Harrison in particular, in terms of running down plays towards the sideline to the backs. Really good recognition on those plays. It had to be a point of emphasis in terms of coaching this week, I would think, because you're playing the Bengals. They play the same game plan the last three times against the Ravens, and they're probably not going to try and test the Ravens deep. In fact, in this game, I've got to jump ahead a little bit, but Burrow was 0 for 7 with 1 interception on throws over 15 yards. That's a 0.0 passer rating. And by the way, very hard to accomplish that because you need to have at least 1 interception. It's very hard to get a 0 passer rating.
Yeah.
No.
That's it's stunning, but then again, you see his calf. He can't do the things that we've seen him do. Now, this also begs the question, and I was thinking about this earlier, and I know we're not scheduled to talk about Joe Burrow, but he's not been healthy 2 out of 4 years.
Mm-hmm. You're saying you wouldn't have paid him?
I would have liked to see him stay healthy in consecutive years before I'm going to dish out that money. Because now calf injury is going to linger all season. He's not going to be healthy all season. The offense is already flat. I think they have lost their entire identity as a football team. Like, I do not understand why they do not run the football more. It just boggles my mind. And then it's just, there's no rhythm to them. In that whole game, they were fighting just to make plays. As an offense, you don't want to go into a game and fight to make plays. You want a good, solid rhythm that the Ravens were in all day, except for that last 3 and out, and that was more because of the penalty than anything, and a little bit of conservative calling, but I understand the situation.
By the way, I'm probably, I would ask the question of, I think you need to ask the question, is it the right play to have your quarterback graduate rather than stick around? I think you always got to ask that question. I think the Ravens maybe would have been well served to ask it about Joe Flacco before they paid him an enormous contract. But one of the problems is for successful football teams, and the Bengals are now in this category, is they can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel to another high draft pick where they're going to get a chance to draft another guy like Burrow. So they have to kind of make do with the Burrow they have. And even if it's not the perfect situation, and believe me, there's a lot of people around Baltimore, and I think some of them have some lousy reasons for it. But other people will give you reasons that actually kind of make you wonder from a GM perspective that didn't want Lamar Jackson signed. And it's not that they want to lose Lamar Jackson. It's they want to trade Lamar Jackson for 2 first-round draft picks instead and see if it works out. And I am not in that group. I'm very happy Lamar got signed.
Right.
But at least I think I can understand the argument a little better. And maybe, I mean, if the only way you don't sign Burrow, I think, is if somebody else is willing to really overpay for him the way, say, the Browns overpaid for Watson in terms of draft capital.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with him being signed because I get the whole quarterback market. It's the same thing I had questions with Lamar was he hadn't been healthy for 2+ years. I got the Ravens hesitation. They went through the process of this whole thing for 2 years because that's how big of a decision it is. Like, yeah, this year we've got weapons galore and things along that sort, but eventually this cap thing is going to eat something up, and it's most likely going to be the defense.
Yep.
So, you have to make those decisions, and you have to hopefully continue to draft very, very well defensively. So you have young talent coming in, and hopefully in 5 years you find another Roquan Smith that can come in and take those young guys under their wing and say, hey, we are as good as anything else. Let's go. This is what we got. We don't have, $60 million corners and this, that, and the other like these other teams have. No, we're paying our quarterback $500 million and taking care of him. And we're just going to have to make do with what we got.
It is an unfortunate fact of life. You look at every single financial transaction differently once you've got that quarterback on the second contract, and everyone is going to have to be looked at. And there are a lot of casualties coming up, and they're coming up in free agency this year for the Ravens. I think there's actually a slightly better chance Dobbins is re-signed now with the injury. I think the chance was about 0 if he'd had a productive year, because I don't think the Ravens could have afforded him. But guys like Kevin Zeitler are not going to be around. And there's some good reasons why Kevin Zeitler is not going to be around, because you don't want to hold the last contract on a player ever. It's kind of like holding an old maid. But in his case, it's also a matter of it's going to be too much money if he's paid reasonably well. Yeah. Queen is going to be gone. There's no way that's going to work out. And I know people are going to be shocked. I'm somewhat sad about that. I do wish they could have traded him for real value, but given he's not, let's enjoy this season. Let's really get a great Patrick Queen season, which he seems to be on pace for. And then, Justin Madubuike, as lousy a start as he's off to this year, is in position to make a ton of money. And I don't see the Ravens really being able to match what he gets offered.
No, because that's why they played, Washington.
Yep.
It was safety. Like, okay, we're going to have him, Travis Jones, Michael Pierce. We can make that work. We would love to keep Justin, but someone's going to pay that man between $15 and $18 million.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would agree. I think that's what will happen.
Somebody will. Unless you move someone on the offensive side, say maybe of Mark Andrews, since you've got a gluttony of young tight ends and an offense that not necessarily needs a dominant target guy in a sense.
Could be. We saw in week 1 that the Ravens really left the tight ends completely out of the offense when they didn't have Andrews. So Andrews 5 catches and 8 targets this week, and there's some big catches for big first downs in this game. And they threw one pass likely for, I think, 4 yards, and Kolar dropped his only target. So they really didn't have the tight ends in the offense at all in week 1. So I shudder. I don't think it's these two guys anyway. I think if they drafted another tight end, they could let Andrews go. I'm not convinced yet.
No, not yet. But these are the type of questions that you're gonna have to ask, because what's his name? The guy that just got paid, Lamar. The tight end.
Oh no, sorry.
Detroit, Minnesota, Detroit. Hawkinson,
yeah.
He just got 17 plus. Andrews, his contract has no more new money. He's got 2 years left on it, but no more new money. If I'm his agent, I'm not letting him play on that.
Oh, well, he's too young to retire. He's got a lot of prorated bonuses. He's going to make $11 million in each of his last 2 years between base salary and roster bonus. I don't think he walks away from that. But that's what you're talking about your agent not letting you play for that. You can try and extend that player, or you can try and keep that player around and let him graduate out of the system. And the Ravens have been very honest with players, and their whole UFA class this year is going to walk on them. But what I don't want to be caught in is the Mason Reed trap of having these guys in the last year where they're constantly renegotiating a 2-year deal every year to get themselves repaid.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen kind of their philosophy on the salary cap and contracts in particular has changed over the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to put themselves in the position that they were for 8 years, which is always tight against the cap, always trying to restructure, always doing this just to pull in a veteran who's probably going to get hurt in week 8 or 9 and not be around.
That's unfortunately, that's kind of like the Odell Beckham formula they just did. So they created a bunch of void years that's already pushed money into 24. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole in particular, just because there's too much of next year's money has already been spent, and I'm kind of pissed off about it as a season ticket holder that it's happened. But let's talk about this game a little bit, because we've got such great things to talk about. Let's move on to some general things. Rock Ya-Sin still splitting time at Darby at left corner. A little bit surprised by that?
No, because he missed a lot of camp. He missed almost 3-4 weeks at the very beginning of camp. New guy coming into a new system. I get it. You also want to get Darby up to speed. He's not at 100% yet.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming off an ACL, so I saw flashes of a better Darby this week than the week before, because he was getting destroyed on end cuts in week 1. This week he seemed better because the game plan was tailored to move inside, so he didn't necessarily have to be like totally aware, and that's not really the Bengals offense, deep ends. So and then Rock, he was solid. They didn't really go after him a lot, but when they did, he held up very well.
Yeah, the Rock Ya-Sin throwing Jamar Chase to the ground like a ragdoll play is one of it's already a chamber of commerce is not the right word, but you know what I mean. Play for this season's highlight film.
Yeah.
It's a thing of absolute beauty. And he had that play, very impressive PD and alone on the back end, which is good. And Darby had the undercut on, I think it was Higgins, but it might not have been. It might have been somebody else where he tipped the ball away up on the sideline. Those are both good cornerback plays. Yes. Making they're very good signs. We've seen some from Stevens on the other side. I think Stevens used the boundary pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit surprising to me that Stevens is the guy who's above all else is the obvious number 1 cornerback at this point, with these other guys sharing effectively number 2 time at left corner.
Yeah, he's played really solid. I'm not mad at the way he's playing corner right now. Last year he had a lot of just getting stuck in his hips a lot, overthinking, getting out of breaks and things like that. I don't see that hesitation anymore. I see a kid once again in the mold of Owe and Queen. They drafted these really young, raw individuals who've only played maybe 1 or 2 seasons in their position. You got to remember, Stevens was a running back at UCLA before he went to SMU.
And played everywhere at SMU.
Right. Mm-hmm. So he's never been in the same role for more than a couple years. Well, now he's basically been a corner for 4 years, 3 years in the Ravens system.
Mm-hmm.
He's starting to get it. And you're starting to see Queen. He's having Roquan next to him is like a Bible next to you. Like, what do I do next, Sensei? Okay, I'll do this next. It's like, and I was talking to Crawford earlier today about I would like the middle linebackers coverage to have been better this week, but I understood the assignment, which was they were being asked to do a lot in this game. And being only 6 defenders in the box and also covering these deep in routes underneath behind you and things like that sort. Big, tall ass. But Stevens has just been growing leaps and bounds. Even last year in the playoff game against the Bengals, he played well.
Yeah. He played well down the stretch. I thought most of his penalties were early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
We did see a little bit of grabbiness show up again yesterday. I'm going to let him off the hook for it being Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
In part. and the other, the guy he's matched up with, the pure X receiver for the Bengals, it's going to be Chase a fair amount of the time. When it's not Chase, it's going to be because they want to match up Higgins against him for some particular purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And either one of those is a tough matchup. Higgins is a size matchup for any corner, period, even a tall one. And he's so lanky. And we saw on the end zone play he made against Darby in particular, we saw T. Higgins at his best, basically able to tap his toes and maintain his balance as he caught a football that was so far out of reach of the cornerback. The cornerback, just Darby in that case, just had to kind of throw his arms up after the play.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that and I just saw AJ Green.
Mm-hmm.
That's who he reminds me of. A stronger up top AJ Green.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's as fast as AJ Green was when he was in his super prime, but T. Higgins is about to get paid as a number one receiver somewhere.
Yeah. I think Cincinnati probably will keep him. We'll see how that goes, but I imagine that's the way it ends up going. He had this conversation with the Cincinnati guy on Know Your Foe, but he was apparently the 33rd pick, so he's just outside of the first round. Mm-hmm. So he has to be paid in year 5 or in year 4 if it comes to that. They might franchise him next year. Cincinnati's in pretty good cap shape. Yeah. So a reasonable chance that they end up doing it. I'd love to see him leave the division. I just don't believe they're going to let it happen.
They shouldn't let it happen. I think Boyd's the odd man out.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, I think he's coming into kind of a pure wide receiver. I know Jamar Chase is that dude, but I almost fear Higgins more in certain spots, in certain situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to me. I think they targeted him 7 or 8 times that first week without a reception. And I keep thinking to myself, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
It had to be Burrow inaccuracy was a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard for me to believe that could happen in a single football game with how much of a catch radius that guy has that you miss him that often. Let's see. We talked a little bit about the corners here. One of the things I really liked in this game was how not just that they forced the ball to the outside wide receiver, tons of wide receiver screens, tons of ball out quick, tons of little swing routes to the running backs and whatnot. But it's how they defended it after the snap. So you show the defense what you're doing, the cover 2, and that forces them into throwing a lot of these little cheap small ball throws. But then the linebackers, particularly Queen in this game, just outstanding at following the running back as needed, chasing down the play, I thought. And I thought he really had a good game. He had one bad missed tackle, but other than that, I thought he had a very good game.
Absolutely. I think you can tell in camp 2 things were on Mike McDonald's board when they first walked in. We must tackle everybody to the football.
Mm-hmm.
In zone defense, it's so much easier because the angles are natural. They're natural angles. You got guys coming inside out and guys coming outside in. If you do your job, you're going to limit what the offense can do. It's when go ahead.
I just want to say that's a fantastic point for starters. But there's another element of that, even beyond that, is the trust you can have in your other players on the field with you, because you've all got eyes on the football in zone defense, generally speaking. You at least have the 2 guys on the back end with the correct eyes on the football. So if you play your leverage properly, the other guy is probably not going to misplay his and betray you, to allow the cutback to the other side. But I love that about this game. And I thought the Ravens, it was the perfect option to have their corners be as effective as they could possibly be. Stevens in particular, just coming downhill, very natural for him. Mm-hmm. It's true on the other side, Darby, we saw great run defense in week 1, but they can play better team defense when they're playing zone. And, Burrow is deciding, I don't have the arm strength to throw deep down the field. I've got to throw these little outside flare passes.
Yeah, it's like you said, starting to show that the last 4 games, the Ravens have played this particular way against Joe Burrow. And tell me a game he had a great day in those 4 games. I mean, the playoff game, it was a disaster in the second half, except for the first drive.
Yeah, I think he said this game that they just played yesterday was his best quarterback rating of the four, and it was only 85.6, and so his others were all lower. I think they've been remarkably consistent in the low 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at what Burrow did in this game, okay, so he threw for 5.1 yards per throw, and for starters, that's not acceptable. Then he also threw one interception in 41 passes. And I'm gonna throw in one other statistic there is the completion percentage. And normally I wouldn't say that that's all that important because yards per pass is the most important stat if it's at a certain level. But if you could throw a very high percentage of completions, and I'm talking about like 90 or 95, you could or
As a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, and a brand new cash out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. If the first two legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use those funds for another bet, or let it all ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odds boosts, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash deposit bonus. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code RAVENS50 like I did to get 50% off. That's RAVENS50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
maybe 85 even. You could make 5.1 yards per target work if you had no turnovers. But the efficient frontier of turnovers and yards per play, he's just nowhere near it at 5.1 with one turnover. There's too much variation in the result for Cincinnati to grind out consistent first downs. They did do pretty well based on what they had, but it's still, if you look at it, I think they had 11 of their 19 first downs they went to third or fourth down on.
Yeah.
Okay. While the Ravens, it was only 9 out of 26. So Ravens are playing really good second down football, really good first down football, making bigger explosive plays. And the Bengals offense was sputtering along, just trying to make it work on third down. This was not a 2019 Lamar Jackson trying to run out the clock on the opponents with consistent 12 and 14 play drives. This was like, we're hoping to maintain a 16 play drive to get a touchdown.
Right. They just were out of sync. And I give credit to the game plan, but also what on Twitter universe, people were like the lack of a pass rush. Mm-hmm. I honestly think it's part of the game plan, and it was brilliantly schemed.
Yes.
And I don't hate sacks, but I think they're overblown, especially in this game now. 15, 20 years ago, a sack, yeah, pretty damaging. But guys, 2nd and 16, that's just an in route now on a drive on a 15-yard dig. Like, we're back on schedule. So sacks on third down, yeah, big impact. That kind of impact number, things along that sort. But when you can consistently have a quarterback's feet never set, always moving, always bouncing, a lot of cross traffic in his face, so a lot of stunting, color changing always in his face, that is disconcerting. I don't care who you are as a quarterback. If you see different colors just flying like this the entire day, no, it's an uncomfortable feeling to try to
that's
throw
something.
that.
I remember back to the Thanksgiving game on 2011 when the Ravens played the 49ers. Mm-hmm. So they had Alex Smith mic'd up for that game. And the Ravens had 9 sacks, by the way, to tie their franchise record at the time. They got 11 against Tennessee a few years later. But the 9-sack game, Alex Smith was on the sideline, and at least once they really caught him talking about all the color he was seeing specifically. Mm-hmm. You say, I kept seeing color kind of thing. And I can't quote him exactly, but that it's definitely exactly your point you're making is that yes, it's if you keep seeing flashes of the opponent's jersey is what they typically mean by color. It could be white, I guess. Then,
right.
That's very frustrating too.
Very frustrating, and I think well done. Played to everyone's strength up front. I think Ajabo just needs to be a little stronger in the run game, but that's going to come with reps and understanding leverage. I never thought I see a player like Jadeveon Clowney allowed to do whatever he wants to do and however he wants to get to the quarterback or however you want to defend something.
He's
allowed to do that. And it might be what's contributing to Justin Madubuike's slow start is he's playing a lot of what we call bird on the defensive line, which is, in essence, the defensive end has free reign.
Okay.
He can rush outside. He can run inside.
He's green-lit.
He's green-lit on the outside. The tackle has to slow play it. So if the DN crosses inside, he's got to work his way outside to cover that side. If he rushes outside, now the D tackle has, okay, now I can counter because he's controlling the outside. I can stay in my original gap.
And is that going to, let's see, on Clowney's side, okay, so if Clowney was the rush linebacker, who typically is going to have probably more freedom in this way, the only guy who has to react to him is then the nose tackle, right? Because he'd be a 5. And he'd be outside. Yeah, he'd be outside the tackle. He'd be a 5 on the naked side, and then the one would be the guy next to him on a typical 4-man front.
Depends on where the back is. It could be the 3 if the back's tilted the other direction.
If he's at a 5 and they have a normally spread line, it's typically going to be the nose tackle. It's going to be the guy next to him. So that's actually less to give up in terms of what you do. But a Clowney oftentimes, in this game, and I think in general for his career, has played opposite the right tackle and right tight end, which makes it then you're giving up your 3 tech to allow Clowney to be green lit.
Correct. Which causes, if you're patient enough as a D tackle, you're going to get a bunch of sacks off of it. Because what's going to happen is Clowney's going to rip in there.
He's going to get flushed up.
He's going to Burrow's smart because he'll just back out like facing the rush so he can bail out and continue to look downfield. A lot of other quarterbacks will spin. And I don't know about other D tackles, but if I see a quarterback spin, I'm putting my helmet through his chest.
Okay. All right, there you go. We talked a little bit about this. Is there anything else we need to get? Yeah, one other thing I want to hit on was 70-57 in snaps. They lost snaps very decisively against the Texans. And this is a team defensively that is probably in some significant rotational problems right now at both outside linebacker, where they don't have a lot of pass rush talent, and at defensive line, where they've lost Calais Campbell, so they don't have the obvious guys who are going to be effective playing a lot of snaps yet, or at least we don't know who those are. Like, guys have been fairly effective across the line. Matabike's had some penalties, but other than that, I'd say everybody's been reasonably effective so far in terms of what they've done. Urban has done a pretty good job, and he's probably been, the least of them, certainly in terms of total snaps. But one of the things I said coming into this year was the Ravens are going to have a lot of trouble if they stay on the field for too many defensive snaps, because it's not really obvious how they're going to pick up all the snaps that Campbell played, plus all the additional snaps that Monken makes them play by having a faster pace offense.
Yeah. So as what worried me this week, and I'm glad you brought up kind of the play count, was the fact that the Bengals only played 17 snaps in the first half. That worries me as a defensive coordinator, because most offensive coordinators come into a game with at least 25 plays in their script. So I haven't seen everything yet. So I can't even really make adjustments at halftime because I haven't seen the entire what they're going to try to do to me. I got like 2/3 of the picture, but the rest of it is kind of like just muddied out in the world.
Now, let me ask you this. They obviously have tremendous familiarity with the Bengals, and they can see from the first half that the Bengals are playing the same Bengals small ball game that they had the last 3 meetings. Furthermore, the Bengals are probably the most extreme team in the entire National Football League of keeping exactly the same 11 guys on the field every single freaking play offensively. They want their big 3 on the field offensively. They have a couple different tight ends they'll use, but basically they're not even that big a part of the offense. It's not really like they're getting a bunch of fresh legs that they're going to really use. Mixon plays almost every single snap. There are a few, he played maybe 85% of the snaps or something. They have a few going to somebody else. And of course, Burrow plays all the snaps, so the offensive linemen play all the snaps. So they don't really have different players on the field. They'll almost tire themselves out with no huddle if they run it extensively.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old Steeler defenses from about 8 years ago or 6 years ago, whatever, where there were just 12 guys. I remember looking at snap counts. You just see the D line of 90 snap, like 90% of the snaps. You're like, that is a lot of work.
It really is. And they've asked that of their defensive tackles. And it's true of Cam Hayward and Tuitt when they were together. But it's true of Aaron Smith and the who's the guy with the big beard that they had for Kiesel.
Yeah.
Kiesel forever. I mean, it's been true forever for that Steelers team. And they did seem to get away with it, is all I can say. It was fairly remarkable in that regard. But
you can't really get away with it in this game now. Because if I know you're always going to be an 11 personnel, that just makes my life easier as a coordinator.
Let's jump right in on that for a second and talk packages, if you don't mind. Because the Ravens, because of this 11 personnel, they basically didn't use any different packages in this game. I've never seen anything this extreme. They played 2 snaps of base alignment the entire game. Now, I didn't actually go back and look at why they might have done this, but I think they did have 2 more tight end snaps than total offensive plays, which might mean literally in their case, they had 2 snaps of 12 personnel, which might have been where they brought the base defense on the field.
Right.
They had 2 snaps of that. Every single other play except for one was the standard nickel.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they had 1 big nickel, which I cannot figure out why they did it because it was just a base 11 personnel look. But they brought Hamilton up to play nickel, and they dropped Worley in on the back end for 1 play. It's actually the play where Patrick Queen got hurt. But on that play, they had a weird alignment with Worley in for just 1 snap. They didn't play. There's no need to play package differences if the other team's going to throw the exact same personnel grouping at you.
Why am I going to get complicated?
Yeah.
You have made my life easier as a defensive coordinator. Now, what I can do, and what Mike McDonald was very successful in doing, is just mixing up how you see it. I'm going to end up where you think I'm going to be. But the question is, how am I going to get there? And I think Mike did a very good job of simulated blitzes, a lot of bluffing, but a lot of different guys bluffing. My favorite blitz is Hamilton does it great, but Washington does it great, which is that delay blitz from basically a full front of just fakeness.
Okay.
You get old school wink, just put everybody at the line and everybody's dropping. But here comes, basically the true blitzer who's the fifth guy on the backside that no one's accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brilliant scheme because what you're doing as a coordinator is saying, I'm going to take away your first look. And if you don't take it, you're not going to have time to get your second look because you think you're protected. But I got a free runner your backside, and they've hit the Bengals with that a lot in recent years.
And Burrow is the kind of guy who is usually pretty good about getting to the hot read.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think that's the key for any basically slot blitz, a lot of safety blitzes, is make sure you understand what part of that field is going to be open and which of my guys is going to get there so that I time it up correctly. Roethlisberger, for a lot of reasons, it just didn't work trying against it. It never works against Mahomes. The Ravens have had terrible luck trying to blitz him, but I love that. I love that slot blitz as well. I thought a lot of what they tried to do is simulated pressure in this game, and maybe we just jump up and talk about the pass rush while we're right on it. Is they were really trying to confuse the line more than Burrow in the game. That the linemen, it's a set of pedestrian interior linemen. I'll call that. I may be even generous at that respect with Volson, Karras, and Kappa.
Okay, yeah, it's a very, like you said, a pedestrian, not a quick-footed group.
Mm-hmm.
Very much built for a pocket quarterback. Just be anchors and try to keep just tight bubble around him in a sense and let him do his thing. Ravens was like, no, we're going to just be flies on the ornament and just cut through that wall. We don't have to get hands on Joe, but what we're doing is making the offensive lineman panic. So in essence, you're making Joe panic because he's not sure if that guy is going to get picked up. There's an extra half a count. Joe's going to be late, or on the Javavian Clowney getting to him and that ball shooting straight up in the air, which is a huge play. He had to hold the ball that extra count because there was color flashing in his eyes. So he had to wait. That's what that pass rush was built for. And it was beautiful to watch.
Yeah, it was. The Ravens are a pass rush generally that relies on second man pressures. So it's everything. They don't have an Aaron Donald and they don't have Myles Garrett. And when you don't have the top pass rushing guys in the league, Hutchinson, whoever you might talk about next, you have to figure out ways to scheme for a pressure to occur simultaneously with another event that gets there just a moment later. And they've been very good at that. And Clowney has been the guy to produce these first pressures, which then create an opportunity for another player to get a quarterback hit. And in several cases, it's been Oweh, including another time in this game. Well, Oweh got a second look for a quarterback hit in this game. But I've been very impressed with the way that's worked. And Clowney in particular is a guy I have a whole new level of respect for, now that he's wearing purple.
He has been as advertised, if not even more of a disruptor than he's a disruptor, but then when he's on your team and you're just seeing him just cause absolute chaos on every play he's involved in, like he doesn't even make tackles and he's just causing piles of bodies that running backs can't get through cleanly. So instead of getting a 5-yard gain, they're getting a 2-3-yard gain, and that's keeping them off schedule.
Done a real good job. I thought done a generally good job anyway against the run. I thought he had a couple plays in this game. One was he allowed a 3-yard conversion down. I think it was inside the 5-yard line when they made the first down, and he kind of beats himself in the head. And I'm going, okay, well, there's a guy who still cares about football. Yeah. I like that. He knows that he kind of got trapped on the inside by the combination of the tight end and the tackle, and he wasn't in exactly the right spot, but I'm glad to see that he understands it was his responsibility there. And honestly, it wasn't the biggest mistake. So that's also a good thing.
Yeah. It's him recognizing that little thing is what's not going to get them where they want to be. So what do I got to do next time I see it? Got to get there.
Clowney has never been all the way, right? He's always played for a bunch of teams that haven't made it, right? He didn't get something in Seattle or someplace where I don't.
Did he go to the playoffs in Seattle?
I'm not sure if.
I think the year he was in Seattle, I think they went to the playoffs.
But I guess my question was, has he been to the Super Bowl anyway?
No,
So, okay.
no.
All right. Okay, so he definitely didn't go with Houston. We can rule that out.
Right.
And then Seattle, Tennessee in 2020, the Ravens eliminated them, so he made it to the wild card game then. 2 years in Cleveland. I think they play in a playoff game in one of those 2 years in 21 or 22.
I think it was 21 with Baker.
Okay. All right. And then obviously he's still waiting on this year. So the question would have been, did he make it in Seattle in 2019? And they probably went. I just don't remember how far they got.
Yeah.
I want to toss out a few numbers here this is the normal thing I go through on my show here, but I talk about ample time and space. Burrow had that on only 9 of 42 dropbacks. A lot of that is a case of I'm scoring it. That's a 3-second pocket. There were probably some other of the ball out quicks which might have developed into an ample time and space, but he had so many ball out quick opportunities that they didn't really give ample time and space a chance to develop. But here's the thing. 9 out of 42 dropbacks, 21% ATS. That's kind of low. But on those plays, he only threw for 36 yards. So 6 of 12, 5 of 9 for 36 yards, 4 yards per pass. And that also included Stone's interception, was when he had a very clean pocket to work with.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see quarterbacks struggle, because Joe had to struggle. Mm-hmm. When teams didn't come after Joe and he could just pick them apart left, right, and sideways and had to think about what was about to happen, he struggled with it. And I think Burrow struggles when he's not in a rhythm. Now, when Joe's in a rhythm.
You're talking Joe. You meant Joe Flacco
Burrow.
With your first.
Yes, Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
He, against the Bengals in particular Joe Flacco would just be a mess, absolute mess. And we all knew what the game plan is that Cincinnati was coming in against Joe Flacco, which was bring safety pressure into his face. Anytime there was a 3rd and 7 or 8, there was some type of safety pressure coming in his face. And yet we could never solve it. But anyway.
It was one of those things. You go into Cincinnati, you'd be a nightmare every time. For Flacco, and you have those huge interception games that he would have every once in a while. And when he was successful at all, he was dumping down to Ray Rice. And if you think about the reversal of fortune here, it's awfully similar in terms of what Burrow's now going through against the Ravens defense.
Yep, absolutely.
Going to toss a little more stats out there, and then we'll move on here. He delivered the ball before pressure could develop 20 times. That's 48% of his pass attempts. 20 out of 44 were ball out quick. Now, there's some truncation of the data here, because when the ball is out quick, I'm immediately taking out any sacks that will occur. I'm immediately taking out any pressures, which tend to be lower yardage plays. But still, when the ball was out quickly, 7.2 yards per pass. Nothing really wrong with that. He completed most of those throws, and unfortunately, I didn't record here what percentage he actually completed on that. But certainly the Bengals offense was plenty effective when the ball was out quickly. It's just you can't always guarantee the ball is going to be out quickly, or you do that.
Right. Totally. You just, yeah.
Now, they only ran 17 plays in that first half, and they got 2 pressures, but they got another 11 pressures in the second half. So if they finished out 31%, I thought it was a fairly reasonable pressure performance. And I think you mentioned earlier that we probably should have expected less from the Ravens in terms of the number of pressures, given how much their game plan was get that ball out quickly.
Yeah, I think going into that game, you as a defensive player, you have to understand that I have to be in my spots. The ball's going to be out quick, and I got to tackle. All week, they just first man in, wrap up. One thing you have not noticed, and I have not noticed, even in the preseason, even with the 90 guys that were there, if you notice, there's not a lot of diving for tackling. It's rare. A lot of guys are bringing their feet, bringing their bodies, bringing their hands. They're bringing everything to the party. We're not reaching. We're not, diving in the last second and getting them. Guys are getting there with 2/3, 3/4 of their body to make plays.
Okay. So where do you're an ex-linebacker, right?
Mhm.
And so where is the ideal spot? Do you want to hit him in the belt buckle, or do you want to hit him in mid thigh to make a tackle? What's your best point of leverage for making that tackle? And I know it might
Best
be
point
situational.
is the hip,
Mhm.
because you can't go anywhere without your hips. So you put a shoulder in the hips, it's going to change their axle of, what do you want to call that? Just verticality
Mhm.
in a sense. So hitting in their waist, hitting in their legs, wrapping around their legs, by far is the best way to bring a guy down. Now, a lot of people are tackling now with their full bodies, and we did that in college as well. My linebacker coach was all about chest to chest when you tackle.
Mhm.
Whenever you can get there, be chest to chest, because that means you're bringing everything to the party. That means you are going to wrap up. If you're first guy on, you can make plays that way. You can rip balls out if you're chest to chest with someone, or you're bringing all your legs in there, because now you got leverage. You can do some things. You can be physical. Physical football teams tackle well. Teams that are a little bit more flighty, kind of like the Bengals, they don't tackle very well. Why? Because all they see in practice is 3 wide receivers. Dink dunk, dink dunk. You can't. When are you gonna practice that? When are you gonna practice hitting that?
Never against your own
Yeah,
players, really. Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
But you go to a Raven practice, you're gonna see 25, 30 run plays at you. You better be ready to tackle.
Yeah.
Physicality. You better be ready to go.
I get that. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you was, in terms of tackling, how much was, and you played college ball around what year, if you don't mind me asking?
I played 2000 to 2003.
2000 to 2003. Okay. So we're talking the glory days of the Ravens defense, and you're at JMU at the time.
Yep.
Okay. So what I wondered was, either your linebackers coach, your defensive coordinator, anybody else who was in charge of quality control on the defense at the time, did they go a little deeper into tackling theory with you, other than go chest to chest, in terms of ancillary value you can get even out of a missed tackle? And I'm really wondering, I think some of that's coming into vogue now at the college level. I don't know about that at the pro level. Some people are like, it's just still, it's 1 or 0, it's white or black. You either make the play or you don't.
Right.
But I think it's more like, if you go into the quarterback and you hit him very hard, in particular running back, and you retrack him 90 degrees or even better, 135 degrees, and all of a sudden he's headed in completely the wrong direction, you've blown up that play.
Right.
And so tell me, what was it like in your experience going through school at that time? Were they teaching any of that at that point?
We learned, we were taught, obviously chest to chest, but full speed.
Mm-hmm.
Why full speed under control? You want to get there, but you don't want to go by the guy. You don't want to be like a flash in the pan. You want to get there under control. That's why we tackle with our full body, because if you do miss, he's missing your entire body. So you have stopped his momentum. And now we played a lot of what the Ravens do now, which is a lot of fire zones. We were a heavy matchup zone type team. So that's why I have a very good understanding of what the Ravens are trying to accomplish. And the goal is everyone has an angle. So if the linebackers are coming inside out, I need my linebackers to go full tilt inside out. Here comes the safety. Here comes the corner. It's like this cone effect. We're all going to meet at the point of the cone. That's how we were taught tackling. And also it was about body preservation in a sense, because you don't want to be tackling with your shoulders all the time. You don't want to be dipping, putting all that continuous banging on your shoulders.
You're taught to wrap up, though, not to use your arm as opposed to your pads, right?
Right. You're taught to wrap up, but the natural tendency for a guy is dip his shoulder and throw it in there. A lot of guys got a lot of shoulder injuries. My freshman year, before we had a change in philosophy because a lot of guys were dipping their shoulders. A lot of guys were always coming out with bad biceps, just arm injuries that can be corrected on defense with just fundamental change in how you tackle.
Mm-hmm.
So now when we were there, I would say defensively, the defensive lineman would have a shoulder thing here and there, but once we changed the way we tackled, shoulder issues were a thing in the past.
All right. Some definitely some very in-depth, interesting things about how to avoid injuries. I really appreciate you bringing that to the show. I'm going to mention briefly a couple things. By number of pass rushers, I'm not going to get into this in any depth. The Ravens only tried 5 times to rush 5+ in this game. So definitely McDonald was not doing it with numbers. He would normally have a fairly even number of 4s and 5s in a typical game and very few times with more. They did try 3 times to rush 6+ in this game, but only twice the whole game did they rush 5 men. And 36 times by comparison, they rushed 4. Bengals only had 4.5 yards per play on those plays.
It's what you dream for as a defensive coordinator. I only got to bring 4 all day.
Yeah.
Okay. That's easy. That's fun. I don't have to stand up there and my ears start spewing smoke.
Yeah.
Because I got to figure out how to bring 6 and not get torched.
There you go. Outstanding. Okay. Other folks, I'm just going to direct you to the article of mine. If you want to look at individual blitzes, they had 8. If they had they had 7 stunts, they were all single. What's I'll say about stunts, and we kind of glossed by this earlier in the show, but I kind of wanted to mention it, is when you're facing a quarterback like Burrow that has a known calf injury and mobility is really going to be an issue, I think you'd be more likely to want to call on-field stunts, on-field games with the guy next to you, right?
Absolutely. It's total the game plan because you want to test to see how healthy he is. And if he's not healthy, I'm going to keep coming and I'm going to keep twisting and stunting. It's the old philosophy as an offensive coordinator. I'm going to go out and figure it out on the first series. If you allow me to do that, guess what I'm going to do the entire game? So we're going to test that out.
All right. I did mention already, Clowney led the team with contributions to 7 pass rush events. There was nobody else even close. Nobody else had more than 2. Pierce and Robinson, as I scored it, had 2 each. By the way, if you go out and look at PFF this week, you're going to notice, and I want to make clear about this, PFF has Clowney for only 2 pressures in this game, 1 a quarterback hit and 1 sack, 0 other pressures. Now, it doesn't make any sense to me either, Denard, but what I think it is that they're not really respecting the throwing cone of the quarterback and the sanctity that has to have for the quarterback to step into that throw. And Clowney was in there all freaking day with 5 other times, basically. Yeah. And so PFF has their own standard for pressures. They call them. If I call them up about these 5, they literally might change some. After hearing about it, they might be like, oh, we agree with that one, and we agree with this third one over here, but the other ones are staying as they are. But they have their own standard for doing it. They have their own timing for doing it. So you'll see different definitions, but this is one I'm very comfortable with my own definition of it in terms of how I've called it. I know that PFF is probably doing it consistently on their end as well. So they're using a definition that's a little different. We have that happen all the times in terms of waiting for offensive line play as well. But I know somebody's going to call me out on this and say, Clowney did have 7 pressures. He only had 2. Look at PFF kind of thing. Well, PFF and I have a different standard for counting them.
Yeah, I can tell you one already off the top of my head that they probably didn't count is the one he dipped inside and Burrow immediately bailed and just kind of threw it to the back that was just sitting in the flat. I know, I remember that one.
If he flushed him out of his regular pocket position and out of the pocket at all, for that matter, that's a pressure as far as I'm concerned. So
I agree with that too, but they probably didn't see that because Joe bailed. And in essence, was it really because of Clowney? You can kind of gloss over like, no, Joe just bailed out of the pocket as a rollout and he decided, whatever.
we just looked at the offensive line tonight, and one thing I'll say is the offensive line had a good game. There's no doubt about it. That the grades massively inflated by Jackson running them out of pressures. Huge number of plays where Jackson evacuated the pocket deftly and evaded pressure to create a positive run. And I charge him with a 0 on such a play, but not a -2 instead that they would get for a pressure. So anyway.
Yeah, I think Lamar played a very smart game. He understood once he checked, and the Bengals stopped checking. If you notice that, once he burned them that one drive like 3-4 times in a row. Oh, you want to drop and cover 2? I'll take 6 yards. Yeah, slide down right here. Second 4.
I've never seen Lamar have the influence on the defense that he did in this last game. I know we're talking about the defense here, but in coming to the line of scrimmage, seeing what they were in, and a lot of times it was simulated pressure looks, or more than once anyway, and he would call out another play and they'd back right out of it.
Yep.
And on a pre-snap basis, love to see that. So
yeah, it's a game you don't want to get into as a defense. It's getting out of pressures.
Denard, I feel so lucky to have you for this particular conversation. A lot of topics overlap with your football experience. But first of all, I want to give people a chance to know where they can find your work online and talk a little bit about what you got going on now.
So you can find me at the Fire Zone Show on Twitter. You can also find me at my personal handle at Denard13. On my show, we break down the individual spots about the defense, and we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I do see the fun stuff that comes on Twitter about certain players, and I like to address those things, like with OA and Queen and their development. So that's what I do on my show. Mike Crawford is the driver of that show as well. And we have a lot of fun over there, and it eventually gets a little silly and it's time to go.
Crawford, one of my favorite people to talk football with of all, and people know that because he's been on the show roughly a zillion times. I mean, in terms of what he does, love his work, and I love in particular what he does with the run game, because he does a lot of charting of the run game that is way above and beyond. And he ought to do more to try and publicize the work he's doing there, but I honestly don't feel like he does enough. And hopefully he'll get credit for what he's done. He's been on my show once to explain this voluminous amount of information he's compiled for a year, and he has another guy who works with him closely on the technical side of it. Their work together is just outstanding, and you got a great co-host there.
Absolutely, it was one of the reasons why Mike and I hooked up a few years ago. Was I made a comment about, I think the Ravens were really struggling. I think it was 2020 when they just were really struggling on first down. I think I made the comment, like, they just were horrific. It just, you could see it you could see it in games, but I don't think you could tell until you looked at the numbers, and then they looked at it and it was like a match in heaven. Like, oh, you saw that? Yeah. Here we go. Let's talk about what you really like.
Yeah, he's one of a kind, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll ask other folks out there, if you're interested in being on a film study short, hit me up. I always do a few shows during the regular season, though the week is very well laid out now in terms of total shows. We have about 8 per week that I produce. But if you want to be on a film study short, you have an idea, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. I really want to hear from you. This is how I find new people to talk football with. And I promise you I'll get back real quickly and we'll talk about your idea. Denard, thanks again for joining us for part 1. We'll be back for part 2, talk about some of the individual performances after we take a short break here.